Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another of our JBDC Virtual Biz Zones. My name is Sansia Campbell, and I am from the Corporate Communications Unit, as you would already know. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know that there are several other places that you could be at this moment, but you have decided to take the time to join us this morning so that we can explore the path to capital for MSMEs. As you know, we have been doing these sessions since the start of COVID. So in April, we started and we took a 1-month break, but here we are, we're back again. And our main aim at the Jamaica Business Development Corporation is to ensure that our clients are empowered, they have all the information they need so that they can make the decisions that are necessary to grow their businesses, particularly in this time, to pivot and to make the changes that are necessary so that you can see some success in your business. Now, just want to remind you that the recording for this morning's session, as well as all the other sessions that we have done so far, is available on our YouTube channel. So if you know someone who will be unable to be a part of this session for whatever reason, please tell them to just subscribe to our YouTube channel. And once the recording has been posted, they will be notified. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to this morning's presenter. His name is Mr. Mark Croskery, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mr. Croskery. Mr. Croskery is the founder and CEO of Croskery Capital. He started it in October 2019 after spending extensive time in the financial services sector in Jamaica, working in securities dealing and investment banking at SSL Group in Barbados, Stocks and Securities in Jamaica, and of course, NCB Capital Markets. He has over 15 years of experience in finance, and hear this, has raised public equity funding of over 1 billion Jamaican dollars. And he's gonna tell you what debt placements is, because he's also he also did that with over 10 million US dollars on behalf of clients and family. He also led the initial public offering of the Jamaica Stock Exchange, in market of the exchange, US dollar private placements for Good Hope and Spanish Hotel and Choco Caribbean in Jamaica. In addition to being a financial expert, Mr. Croskery is the host of Business Live Extra on CVM, which features a vast range of insightful, informative, and inspiring interviews with business leaders across Jamaica. So, as you can see, Mr. Croskery is very well qualified to talk to us this morning about the path to capital for our MSMEs. So I want you to just stay tuned. If you have any questions, it's going to be an interactive presentation. You have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If I see where I can put the question in there for you, I'll do that. Otherwise, we'll facilitate the questions at the end of the session. But please enjoy this morning's session, and it's over to you, Mr. Croskery. Unmute.
Yeah, Sansia, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I don't do too many, Zoom meetings or so, but we have a presentation today, and we're going to be talking about raising capital for, we use so many acronyms in Jamaica, like MSMEs, but we're going to be talking about, the pathway to really raise capital for, actually, if you're a micro, small, medium-sized, enterprise. So, we have a small presentation, but we want to make it as interactive as possible. If there's anybody who wants to ask questions, if you want to, as Sansia says, jump into the chat, we think that's a better way to do it, and ask as many questions, as you have. So we're going to share that, soon or shortly. But I think one thing to kind of go over the whole, theory behind it and everything is, one of our key things is to be aligned on what is, micro, small, medium-sized businesses. And, we do have a few slides on that to talk about the World Bank's thoughts, in general, as well as, our thoughts in Jamaica. But, we use the words or the acronyms a lot: SMEs, MSMEs. And I think you have to start off as an entrepreneur, as a foundation, to figure out, what you really want in life, and, what you're passionate about, and how you're going to achieve that. At the end of the day, Jamaica is still a very much so debt country, as well as the Caribbean, a structure that's really built on promissory notes. We don't want to jump and say, grants, but there are grants that are available out there, but it's a structure that's very much still built on debt. So, just a decade ago, it's probably still very high. When we had the repo market, 70% of the financial instruments or more were built kind of on, debt securities, and debt securities. If you look at, say, the Financial Services Commission or the FSC annual report, you'll notice that debt securities, or especially private placements, are typically an even bigger market than the equity markets or the IPO markets in Jamaica. So it's not, commonplace information in terms of what private placements are, but if you're that size company, or where you want to get to at the end of your pathway of raising capital, then typically you start to deal with your broker dealers, your security dealers, your investment bankers, and they're going to be telling you about, for example, private placements and then initial public offers. So, there was a record-breaking year with IPOs in terms of, Wigton, Trans Jamaica, but that wasn't the norm every year. So, private placements, if you follow some of those annual reports, which are very good, what you tend to see is that that's the market where a tremendous amount of capital, whether it's accredited investors, high net worth investors, pension funds, but a tremendous amount of capital in Jamaica. And what the central bank and everybody always calls the liquidity, that's where the money goes into. So it's a critical thing as you plan your pathway, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, to think about where the money really is in Jamaica in the long term when you're ready. That's not the primary focus today. It's in the private placement market, and we'll talk about that. We're going to kick it off by first, just sharing the presentation. So essentially what we really wanted to do and talk about was, Santhia really wanted us to go into understanding the whole capital curve for MSMEs. And we use a tremendous amount of acronyms, in Jamaica, as we always say, and it's a good foundation, a good place, to start to learn about that stuff. So, growing up as well, I've always been confused, what is a SMA, what is a SME, what is a MSME? And these are just some thoughts. If you jump onto Google, actually, there's not necessarily papers or, white papers or any documents that are showing, stuff that is, 2020 or 2017. But there's some older documents. But that's interesting because with Jamaica's move towards digital and technology, then, the first thing as an entrepreneur I would encourage is, know what your facts are, know what your details are. So what's interesting is that there could be some updated thoughts out there, but the World Bank's thoughts are that a micro business is under 100,000 US. A small business is 3 million US or under, and medium size is 15 million US or under. And they're specific. They do say these are sales or revenues as well as, let's say, total assets. Now, that's from an establishment as the World Bank, participates in Jamaica, in the Caribbean. We have lots of other agencies. Then we talk about Jamaica, which is very applicable for today. And sometimes maybe different agencies, which we'll get to that, and the acronyms have different criteria. And I think that's what creates some confusion, but it's good whether you're, just employing a few persons, whether you're just self-employed. The point is that you need to know this information and have it on hand so that you can plan your pathway and know where you're going. So in Jamaica, we see micro is 10 million or smaller, small is 50 million or smaller, mid-size is 150 million or smaller. Now, I don't know how they came up with the numbers, but if we just think about a per capita income, maybe between Jamaica and, the US, and use a multiple of, somewhere between 7 or 10 times, what's interesting is if you divide some of, per capita side, and then look at the two numbers and how they pan out. On the micro side, it's almost similar, 100,000 US. It's off by, let's say, 4 million Jamaican. On the small side though, it's almost like 300,000 US versus 3 million US. So maybe there's a per capita multiple, I don't know, but let's say it's 7 or 10 times. And then medium size is, again, if you look at the multiples, it's almost divided by 10 or a multiple like that when you compare it to the World Bank's thoughts. So, general rule is look at the per capita income in, USA, look at the per capita income in Jamaica or what's published. Sometimes it is outdated. It's usually 2018, 2019, not very current. And then what ends up happening is you get your theory note to think about how you think about structuring your business and raising capital. Now, what's interesting with these statistics, and we'll talk about that, is that the junior market, which started in 2009 with Access Financial, and that's the junior stock market, actually, has companies on it which are significantly bigger than, the 150 million target or the medium size. And the junior market has led to a lot of young Jamaican entrepreneurs, but age is not a factor. That say, they want to list immediately, they want to get on the stock market. So the word is junior, but those companies technically are way bigger than, let's say, a medium-sized company. I mean, most are doing revenues well in excess of 500 million. So, when you have a meeting and you're a 1-year-old company, 2-year-old company, let's say you even get to 50 million of revenue, you're doing well, you're still maybe a small business, but a lot of times what we've seen is that persons want to list very quickly, very immediately. And in hindsight, that's not necessarily the right model. So the purpose of this is really to just talk about statistics and know where you're at in terms of different hurdles, because you'll go into your banker, you'll meet with your chartered accountant, you'll meet with a financial advisor, and you may go in and say, look, I'm a mid-sized company, when really you're a micro company. You may go in and say, my business is booming, my revenues are up, 50% year over year, but you're really still a small company, besides talking about corporate governance, the management accounts and everything like that. So it's really intuitive to just know the statistics and know where you're at in terms of your company, life cycle. So when we talk about this whole process and, alignment, we use a lot of acronyms. You always hear them. I mean, sometimes you're in meetings and persons say, please spell out, in those documents or papers, please spell out that whole word. Let me know what it means. But 7 acronyms that you must know if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to make it in Jamaica. Let's say you don't have overseas capital, you don't have access to somebody who is high net worth immediately. But 7 acronyms you got to know is DBJ, so Development Bank of Jamaica, BOJ, the Central Bank, where Richard Biles is, and TEAM, which is Bank of Jamaica, MOF, Ministry of Finance. And then you have your private sector entities, which have gotten smaller over the years, but PSOJ, JMEA, Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, and our national news. You get great info there. It's not, it's not something persons draw on a lot, but Jamaica information. So at the end of the day, you got to know these things, because you'll see, you look on social media, you'll go to meetings, and you'll see that a lot of companies at their small or mid-stage start and become members of as many associations as they can. Sometimes after 12 or 24 months, they realize that in some cases they're getting value, in other cases they're not getting value, and the membership fees can be expensive. But most, entrepreneurs are doing this for the networking, which we'll talk about, and, to really, get into the market. But if you're an entrepreneur, you have to know about these 7 acronyms. These are acronyms. Familiarize yourself, get to know the staff there. Start from the bottom up, get to know the mid players, get to know people that are working within these companies, their departments, whether you're going to socialize with them, whether it's a letter that you drop off. You hear about all the great stories globally, and they'll tell you, my company was a widget factory. And at the end of the day, what I did is I wrote 7 letters and dropped them off to these institutions, introduced my company profile, and you never know who's going to pick up that letter or who's going to get a copy of that letter. So that is critical, is even if your company is doing 5 million Jamaican, 10 million Jamaican, 50 million Jamaican, familiarize yourself, don't stay in the dark, get out there, drop off your letters, even if you just say the manager. Persons may say, I don't know anybody at one of these, acronym companies. I don't know anybody there. It doesn't matter. Drop an email to info. You never know who picks it up. Drop a letter to the manager. try and run into somebody, try and figure out where they actually socialize, where do their staff go to, maybe run into them there, stuff of that nature. No, the other point is that don't be confused. If you're, and regardless of your age, just like how, the founder of, Walmart, the founder of a lot of these different companies in the market, and some started, young, some started late, whatever age you are, is don't be in too much of a rush. So when you look at comparing some of these statistics to the dream, everybody tells you with a junior market booming and the wealth that has been created in Jamaica, that, immediately they want to list. You see the articles come out from almost the first year or the second year that say they want to list on the market. And in fairness, entrepreneurs are also doing this to drum up credibility and to drum up access to capital. So there's nothing wrong with it. But just realize that when you really go through those statistics, even if some of them are outdated, but it's what's on Google, and Google is key, is World Bank, Jamaica National Policy, or let's say, Jamaica National Policy overall, not JNBS. So if we're talking about that, the thing is that the revenues for SMEs or MSMEs are way lower than the junior market. So don't set yourself up for failure in terms of, if you're doing it for the optics, for the public relations, to gain some access, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's always good. That is the way it works. Get your story out there, build your credibility. But if you're going to tell somebody, listen, I want to list in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and you're at 50 million in sales, you might lose some of your credibility. So be careful, about doing that. Let's take a sample size of some companies on the stock exchange. This is the junior market. You'll have a Jamaican teas, you'll have a Caribbean, flavors and fragrances, and you look at their revenue numbers. Some of them are between 600 million to 1.5 billion. You look at a Paramount Trading. So if we just took a sample size of 2, 3, 4 companies and looked at where their sales are, their turnover, their revenue, all the same thing, somewhere between 600 million, 1.5 billion, of revenue sales, then you can clearly see that if you're in the MSME space, money from family, friends, which we'll get to, money from associates, colleagues, anybody that who wants to really support you and you have trust with, and we'll talk about that. At the end of the day, then, the multiples of revenue on the junior market are actually way higher than, an MSME. So don't rush it, don't overthink it and jump into doing something like that. So, compare where your business is, of course, in a spreadsheet. Do a spreadsheet and say, look, I want to be at Caribbean Flavors. I want to be at a Jamaica Tea level. I want to be at Paramount. There's all these success stories. But some of these companies, you look at footnote 1. Always jump down when you're looking at audited financial statements. They're available on jamstockx.com, and always go to footnote 1. It will tell you the identifier of the company, the year it was incorporated. Sometimes you can work out how much share capital also the company started with. Some of these companies have started with 5 million, 8 million, 10 million, 20 million Jamaican. It's not as much money as we think, but what they've done is that they've been able to grow slowly, withstand a lot of issues. And some of them are 10, 13, 20 years old. And then they're getting to this kind of, let's realize some wealth and so forth. Some of them have some director's loans. Some of them might have some related party loans after the initial injection 10, 15 years ago. But if you take a sample size, you will notice that some of them on average are somewhere between 10 to 20 years. We've seen some players who are 13 years old, 15 years old, as a company, but these companies are really teenagers. So a lot of the companies on the junior market are teenagers. So as you're growing and, you're in year 2 and the business is struggling, things aren't going as well as you planned, you're struggling to meet cash flow needs, to pay vendors, your age payables are growing. Don't feel bad about that. At the end of the day, the junior companies are teenagers. And, when you're an MSME or an SME, you're a toddler. You're going to be 2 years old. You might be 3 years old. You're seeing how it goes. Now, an interesting topic, which we will talk about, is in 5 years, if the business still isn't working, or even in year 3, when do you decide to turn off the lights? That's probably something we don't do a lot, in Jamaica or the Caribbean, is just make a decision and say, look, this idea I had or this business, I can't get capital, I can't get debt, it's not working out. I just need to turn off the lights and maybe start something else. So, and there's also fundamental reasons why we're not like that. You know, some things in the legislation, probably some things in the financial system don't allow you to do it like what happens in the US, where you just turn off one business and turn on another. But that's a topic also that, you know, we have to talk about and talk about very seriously. So let's talk about, especially for the entrepreneurs, you know, capital formation and MSMEs. The first and most important and biggest thing is people have to trust you. Not just your story, not just your business credibility. They have to trust you, because at that stage, you don't have a balance sheet. Let's face the facts. I mean, maybe you have a Nissan AD wagon in the balance sheet. Maybe you have a few bikes. Maybe you have something. But at the end of the day, you don't really have too much assets. So you don't have fixed assets. This is the reason why the bank is probably not funding you as yet. But you can go to your credit union. You can go to your personal banker. So at this stage of your business development, you're probably able to get personal credit if your credit is decent or good, but you're not able to really get business credit. And the business probably has very little assets. Maybe you're even leasing assets. So that's a predicament. So trust goes very far. So, you know, be on time, you know, make your deadlines, you know, keep whoever you need to keep posted. So at the end of the day, if you miss a deadline for Monday, you know, call that vendor, call that person on Tuesday, just keep them posted. Communication is really key in this aspect of your career and timeline of your career. Now, a super important point, and persons miss this point a lot when you're getting started, is that you have to have cash. Without cash, you know, you're going to run out. You're not going to be able to operate. You've got to get cash in. You know, whether that's through your revenue cycle, whether it's through, you know, when you look at a cash flow statement, you have investing activities, financing activities, whether it's through debt, whether it's through other securities that are coming into your business, but you have to have cash, folks, at the end of the day to run your business. You know, keep the lights on, keep things going, whatever sector you're in, keep it going. Now, this is a very controversial point. And, you know, it's a point actually where it might seem like, you know, Croskery Capital is shooting itself in the foot. But at the end of the day also is that you have to be careful how you hire professional services. You have to be careful how, you know, once your brand gets out there, let's say you do a personal story, let's say you're active on social media, all of a sudden chartered accountants call you, attorneys call you, maybe, you know, other business persons call you. And, you know, persons are saying to you to raise that check, you've got to get these things in place. Of course, your management accounts, of course, you know, these statements, corporate governance, do board charters, but really and truly go back to the point we made earlier. A junior market company is doing 600 million, 1.5 billion in sales. You're doing, let's say 10 million. Let's say you're doing less. You're doing 50 million. Realistically, if your net margin is 5%, if your net margin is 10%, that would be great. You know, there's some chemical companies that do, you know, 10%, but very few sectors do 10% or higher. So you're making net profit of 5 million Jamaican. I mean, if a professional comes in and says, and if you did 10 million, you're making net profit of 500,000 Jamaican. So if a professional came in and said, look, I want to help you, I want to do this, but my fees are 100,000 a month or 200,000 a month, you're bankrupt already, because you've taken on that, you know, to focus on the dream, to find the dream, but you're only making $500,000 a year, 5% net margin, 10 million Jamaican. So think about that point carefully. A lot of people are going to jump into your ears and give you lots of advice during this phase. People are going to come from left, right, and center, especially if you get some public relations, especially if you do something good with your brand, you know, your brand starts to pop and explodes, but that's only a part of the equation. So be careful at this stage. You need them at some point, and we'll talk about that, but be careful about just jumping in and hiring them right away or from the get-go. Now, joining the herd and the crowd and, you know, the networking can always be a great thing. Everybody wants to be a part of that scene. You want to get out there. You actually start to feel that, you know, with all this energy and positive energy, that by networking, it's going to deliver you capital. And there is some truth to that. You know, don't take this as saying, look, don't go on network. But the thing is that networking can become expensive. So maybe look at interesting ways. You know, maybe you pop into, whether it's a hotel. We have lots of hotels in Kingston. Maybe you pop into, you know, the local Starbucks now. Maybe you pop into a Cafe Blue, and, you know, try and do things as economical as possible. Everywhere you go, you don't necessarily have to buy something. So try and do it smart. You know, there's lots of co-working rooms now, but they have a fee. Maybe at this stage you can't afford that. So where can you get someone to meet you who, whether you're trying to impress them, just have a meeting with them, but you're in this early stage now, and the reality is that you're trying to grow your personal brand and your company brand. So you might choose, you know, some venue that comes across as, okay, this is a likable venue, it's a good venue, but it might be expensive. And if that professional is smart, they're going to say, well, you invited me, so you pay the bill. Easily, you know, one of those meetings, that bill, depends on where you go to, can be anywhere between 1,000, 3,000 Jamaican, 5,000 Jamaican. Before you realize, all of a sudden you wonder, why is it that I'm running out of cash flow? Well, you know, to do what you're doing, and you're justifying it in your mind, because usually at this stage you don't have a chief operating officer. So most of the great businesses, like, you know, with Cinco, you've seen it, at Musson, you've seen it, you know, there's always two people, somebody who's high energy pushing, which is you, the entrepreneur, and then there's usually somebody who's, you know, the CFO, COO, who's balanced, who you respect each other's opinions, and you grow as much as possible out of your business. Now, in your early stages, what we're talking about today, you can't afford that person who keeps you balanced. You know, there's different types of entrepreneurs. There's level-headed, there's high energy, you know, a bit crazy. Sometimes they say they're bipolar and stuff like that. And, you know, you have a family dinner and all that stuff, or with your friends. But the reality is both can work, but typically you need that yin and yang. You know, if you have two yings, at the end of the day, the business is probably not going to work. Likewise, two yangs. So try and get that balance. You know, your opinion is not always going to be right. And that's why you need that balance factor. And you don't want to run down the herd and so forth. Just like the stock market. If everybody's buying up something, the price is going to go super high. So you don't need to run down that and buy it immediately or chase that stock. It's better to buy when there's a crisis or there's an issue with a blue chip stock or something like that. So just think about that too. Now, invest in yourself. Think about your, you know, we don't want to use the word selfish, but thinking about you. Your self-worth is what's going to build this business, because in the early years, it's all about your personal credibility. We come back to that factor, you know, trust. If you're going to approach somebody and say, look, I'd love you to invest in my company. If it's a debt security, if it's a loan, if it's anything, and it's $1 million Jamaican, it's 2 million Jamaican, whatever the figure is, at the end of the day, you need to actually be able to access that money. And to be able to do that, you're going to have the trust factor. So very, very important. And find persons, you know, it's just like friendships. Find persons who are willing to give you time, who are willing to value you and your ideas, and assist your MSME. Now, we're not saying, you know, find people who are always just free or who are cheap, but genuinely, there are persons out there that, you know, they're called mentors. You know, you're the mentee, but there are persons out there who genuinely will assist you. They'll answer a few emails a week, as long as it's not overburdening. They'll do a phone call with you, you know, do a WhatsApp call now, do a Zoom, you know, just like what we're doing today. But the bottom line is there are genuine people out there who will help you, whether they were a part of your early life or it's somebody new who you've come across. Maybe it's how you carry yourself. You run into somebody and they're like, whoa, you know, I really like that guy. I really like that lady. I want to help them. I want to see them do well. So in your early stages, try and find 1 to 3 persons like this, you know, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can talk to, that aren't going to say, oh, by the way, it was great spending time with you. And we spent, you know, 3 meetings and it's 30,000 a meeting and boom, $90,000. And all of a sudden now, you know, that person might also badmouth you if you don't pay them. So be very careful, you know, how you choose things. At the end of the day, all of your actions could have a consequence. And even at this stage, don't be afraid sometimes to say no. Somebody might approach you and say, look, I can really help you, but, you know, check them out. You know, can they really do what they say they can do, you know, with the management accounts? You know, are they willing to give you references? So just be careful at this stage of the business. It's a very young stage. And while you want to get ahead really fast, the point is that, you know, you can make mistakes also. It is a part of the learning curve. You pick up your learnings and move on. But just be careful that you choose persons who you think have your best interest at this stage of the business. So we want to talk about, you know, each part, because, you know, the acronym, it's a long acronym. It's an acronym that's out there. You know, we always tend to see it in the national newspapers, you know, the SME and the MSME. And even personally, you know, before doing, let's say today, doing some research and, you know, talking to everybody, it's even a topic that has confused me in my previous capacity, and now for quite some time. I wasn't as interested in understanding it, but in speaking today, you really realize why there's some confusion about it. And we just need to paint a little bit of a canvas, because we went over some revenue numbers, we went over some sales numbers, but we really have to paint some of the canvas, I think, to get through on this whole topic here. So a micro business, it can be a startup. It's a startup, it could have no revenue contracts. Sometimes startups have a revenue contract, so you have some revenue that come in. Now, there's little or no business credibility, and we spoke about that earlier. So everything boils down to your personal credibility. Nice to meet you. Where was your first job? Okay, how long were you there for? Okay, I was at, I don't know, NCB. I was at Grace Kennedy. I was at Jamaica Broilers. I was there for 2 years. Okay, where did you go to high school? I went to high school here. How many ones did you get? It's some background. Where are you from? Where are you from in Jamaica? What parish are you from? Do you know so-and-so? So this whole stage here, guys, is about personal credibility. Persons think networking is just going out, having some drinks, having some dinner. There's a cost for that at the end of the day. So this stage is about personal credibility. What church do you go to? Okay, what association? Are you a part of this club or that club? But this whole part here is building the bond, building the connection with someone. And then that person needs to take kind of a chance or a punt and jump on board with you. So sell your personal credibility. You could have a great company. You could think it's the best brand in the world. You could have got it done by a graphic designer in Jamaica, anywhere in the world, on all those, hot things that are a bit cheaper, like Fiverr and things like this. But at the end of the point is that it's your personal credibility that's going to come down to it. So that person needs to have a connection with you, and you need to be strategic and realize that you need to give them a connection. And you have to get into, their brains, talk to them, let them feel comfortable, the trust factor. Now, network, make as many calls as you can, take as many calls as you can, listen to persons, listen to them. You don't have to speak over them, but listen to them and be active, speak on your calls. LinkedIn is a fantastic platform now. It used to just be, this professional platform. You post your resume, your CV, your whole, experience, your education, your phone number, your email address. No, LinkedIn it's a part of the whole social media, the whole social media platforms, and persons are connecting, speaking on messages, talking more there. So don't underestimate LinkedIn. You see sometimes searches per week, and it gives you all this cool data, and you connect with persons. So get your business out there and get your personal brand out there as well. So persons are going to get into your personal brand. Now think about funding. At the end of the point is there's grants, there's debts, there's also promises or promissory notes, but they're also like promises. You got to pay it back in the future. So that's a simplistic way. But at this stage, you have to really think about the market you're in. Jamaica is still a debt-driven market. Persons want guaranteed returns, they want fixed returns. And it's so hard for you mentally because you're a small business, you're probably trying to pay also for yourself, your family, whatever lifestyle you have. And that's the whole balance of the challenges with micro businesses. And the adage really is family and friends, guys, is at this stage, the persons who believe in you the most, but it can hurt your family dinner. It can hurt some of your friendships. So you want to be careful with this. There's another adage that says never do business with family and friends. But in this stage, you've got to approach your family and friends to bring in some money. Whatever the ticket size is, whatever the money is, $500,000, $1 million Jamaican, whatever it is, bring in some money from family and friends. It's usually the easier part. Then it's kind of like what they say in some of the lingo, like a Series A. You bring in a Series A or your first investor, and then you can go to somebody and say, look, I just raised $1 million Jamaican dollars. So I'm coming to you independently because I want you to believe in me. My family believes in me, or my friend who owns this company believes in me. Maybe you knew him from high school, something. It's a story you're building. Get your first investor. Your first investor, regardless of who it is, get them into the business. Whether you knew them from prep school, high school, a job, and hopefully they're doing something cool. It builds your story. It sounds sexy at the end of the day. And you can say, I have this person, and I now need your money in Series B, or I now need to talk to you as well too. And you keep it running and going from there. Oops, sorry about that. So let's talk about the next one. small to medium sized, because we really want to differentiate between the two businesses, micro and then small to medium sized. We're grouping these two together. So the SMEs have huge recognition in the marketplace. MSMEs is even more difficult to pronounce or say than SMEs. So persons usually talk about SMEs. You go to the bankers, you're always seeing, SME financing available, SMEs in the market. And at this stage now, wherever your business has gotten to, maybe you've done an article or two, maybe you're being recognized, but persons now know your company, or they also know of you, who the owner is. In Jamaica, we love to deal with the boss. It is a boss culture. That's not going to change. So persons may say, I want to hire a CEO who's not too recognizable. It typically might not work, because it is a boss culture at the end of the day. So you're being recognized now. Don't let it go to your head. Don't let it swell your head. Stay humble in this stage, focus on your priorities, raising capital, getting more cash flow in the business, doing what's right, keeping your revenues growing, stable, managing your expenses. Revenues is not profit. So make sure you have a good accountant, but don't overpay for it. In these years, your bank statement can function as your accounting. So cash is king and cash flow is king. You're a small business, somebody races in and says, I need you to get accounting. Okay, a lot of entrepreneurs are doing that because the bank wants it, or maybe a potential equity investor wants it, and we'll get to that. But the thing is that you can use your bank statement. The bank statement gives you a wealth of information. You have your debits, you have your credits. You might not have accrual accounting, but your bank statement lets you know where you're at. So accounting fees coming in, can you really afford them based on your business, your net margin? Just always think about that in your back of your mind and think that you brought your business to where it is today. So can someone else necessarily criticize you or guide you? In some cases, yes. In a lot of cases, no. You have gone through the struggle. You've brought the business to where it is, from a micro business to a small business to a medium-sized business. So trust yourself, trust your gut. Go with your gut feeling how you feel about professionals, about advisors, about persons. But people will start coming to you now hot and heavy. Don't let it swell your head. And also be careful of just who you pick and choose during this phase. So that brings us to the point of equity and debt. When you're a micro business and even a small business, we keep saying debt will be easier to get. Debt is a easier structure. Sometimes investors prefer it because minority shareholder rights aren't necessarily protected yet. In Jamaica, in most of the Caribbean, unlike say the USA or the US land. So debt tends to be a better thing. Now, some persons might ask you for a personal guarantee. They might say some technical wording. We want fixed and floating debenture over the business. But if the business has no assets, does that really make sense for you or for them? So think about these questions. During this phase, also ask your mentor. Don't be afraid. Those same 1 or 3 mentors, hopefully from the micro stage, feel free to talk to them. Maybe some of them might want equity in the business because they've seen you grow, not just a company, but they've now seen you grow individually. The trust factor. So getting to know you, seeing you, go through these, hoops, these loops of the business, they get to know you better and they go from there. So be careful who you choose to align with in this stage. No can take you 10 seconds. And 10 seconds of grief, 1 minute of grief. But if you say yes to everybody, you might have months, years of grief. So be very careful now. Your brand starts to pop. You're in the Observer, you're in the Gleaner, you're on Loop. Your social media starts to take off. All of a sudden, everyone is coming to talk to you. No, you have to be very careful. It can produce negative energy. It can also take away what you've created. Everybody coming to you might not be a great person. They might not have your same vision in mind. So be very careful at this stage now. You're starting to kind of take off, that whole X and Y axis, things are going well, you're feeling well. Just make sure there's cash in the bank account as you feel well, as we said, cash flow. Now on the topic of governance, everyone's going to tell you from very early, even, you speak to a mentor and the mentor, let's say, is running Jamaica's largest bank. Let's say they're running the second largest bank. Let's say they're doing a huge food manufacturing operation. So I just raised $1 million, 2 million Jamaica and I have a micro business here. The first thing they're going to say to you, because that's the culture, that's the mindset they're in at work every day. How's your management accounts? Who's on your board of directors? How's your governance? And it makes sense. But at the same time, okay, you can't take on something. How am I going to afford this? So, you really have to take a step back and say, I really appreciate your advice. It sounds good. I mean, are you going to give me 2 million Jamaican or 5 million Jamaican to afford all of this as one-off costs? How will it look on your income statement, your profit and loss? But while you want the knowledge, you want the mindset, you're in two different spaces now. You're a small business, that person you're looking up to, you're excited about, you're going for lunch with them, you're having a coffee with them. They're in a whole different mindset. So let's come back to the age of the company. We're not really necessarily digital tech here where things are just taking off in 12 months or 24 months in Jamaica yet at this stage, or the capital markets are there. So they might be running an 80-year-old company and you're now running a 2-year-old company, and you're comparing, it's really apples and oranges. So don't fool yourself with that. Of course, ask them for some money, but don't fool yourself with the reality of where your business is, where their business is, your personal life is, and their personal life is. So just keep that in mind. It has to be affordable to you. It has to be within the parameters of the business. So don't take on something where all of a sudden all your cash flow just goes boom down to zero, and then, okay, great, yes, I have this corporate governance document. It is critical for me to be able to get to the next stage of my investment. But now, how are you going to pay for your operations? So keep this in your mind as well. Unless you're going to get a letter of intent, a letter of undertaking, let's say from that mentor or that potential investor that can help you go through that phase and strengthen your governance and stuff. So governance is a good thing. We're not saying it's a bad thing, but a lot of young entrepreneurs, older entrepreneurs, a lot of business startups, whether they are small or medium sized, get into this kind of trouble. They bring in some fantastic consultants, and there are fantastic consultants out there. But, as a consultant, they keep as a third party, and they might charge, massive fees. Can your business deal with it? We know as Jamaicans sometimes also as owners of these small, mid-sized businesses, we don't disclose everything. So sometimes it makes it more difficult, for that financial advisor or consultant to actually help you, because this might be their fee, but you really need them to be half of that cost or a quarter of that cost. So transparency is key. Be open about your dealings, be open about what you're really looking for and what you want, in the marketplace. So, that's kind of a wrap or it for the presentation side. Before we kind of get into Q&A and questions and answers, there are good case studies out there. I really want to encourage everybody to, some case studies are private. You probably have to track them on Google, but there are real case studies out there. If you look at a junior company, you can look at their share capital. You can look at how many related party loans or loans that they have that have come into the business. So you can kind of almost see like, okay, this person invested their own money there, then they took some money here, then they got a bank loan. You can kind of see that if you go over the trajectory of the financial statements. There is a private company market that's growing, not just in Jamaica, but in the Caribbean. And especially some of the entrepreneurs now are even doing their own spreadsheets, and they say, I got money in 2018. This was my Series A investor. The valuation paid was, let's say, 5 million Jamaican. Then in 2019, I got my Series B investor. The valuation was this. So what's very encouraging is that there is a kind of private market that has developed or is developing where persons, regardless of the age, they're sharing information. They're like, this is my cap table, and it's impressive. These are who my shareholders are. This is my cap or capitalization table. My shareholder names, the percentages, how much of the issued share capital they have, the company's authorized share capital. And that's very exciting. So there are case studies that are being built. Now, these are not Harvard case studies or McKinsey case studies, but it is something that is developing. So it's something for everyone to be aware of, is that there are these markets out there. Now, who should you go and attack? Who should you go and speak to? Of course, accredited investors, high net worth investors. Sometimes some of the high net worth investors are very discreet. They're very private, so you might not even know who they are, but go and look for the money. Look at the top 10 lists of companies on the junior market, on the main stock market. This is actually public information. Sometimes there's a cost, but as an entrepreneur, you can go and request it. So if you see a name popping up a lot on some of these lists, whether it's the top 10, the top 100 lists in annual reports, do a flyer, as they say. Wing it. Don't feel bad. Take your pride in, and at the end of the point is, or the day, go and see that investor. Send them a brief information memorandum. Produce it yourself. Do an executive summary. That's even easier than an information memorandum. Drop it off if you can find it. Drop it off at their house. Drop it off at their workplace. Maybe it might be more ideal. Try to get an email from them. But one thing I can say, accredited investors, high net worth persons, they like people who put in effort. So the effort's on you. The effort is on you to send a calendar appointment. It's on you to do the email. It's on you to do the follow-up if you want, whether it's debt or whether it's equity. And there's a market that's developing. So it's not fully developed yet, or else we'd have a lot more positive case studies. But what I like to see is that persons are now sharing their cap tables. They get it. They can do it on their own. They don't need a professional service to necessarily do that. With Google, with YouTube, with all of these things now, there's all of these self-help things online. You can teach yourself. So a lot of times, while Croskery Capital does offer professional services and bespoke services, the thing is, a lot of these things depends on your stage of your business. If you're micro, if you're small, go do a tutorial on YouTube. Go and learn about it for yourself. And when you're in, those different platforms, Google, YouTube, or so, it will just show you. It's amazing. Sometimes there's templates online, there's videos online that show you that this is how a cap table needs to look, and this is how an executive summary needs to look. So don't procrastinate. Don't take too long to do something. Do it yourself. Get it out there. High net worth, and I'll say that over and over again, they really like synergies are important. Trust is paramount. Personal credibility, but they really like effort. If you keep following up, if you keep doing effort and make them feel like their lives are going to be easier and they can make some utility or returns through you, there are genuinely some high net worth investors out there who, of course, they want the return on investment. They want the ROI. They want the ROE, more acronyms, return on equity. But genuinely, there are some high net worth who also care about Jamaica. They're very patriotic. They want to see next series of entrepreneurs do well. There are definitely a few of those out there. Hard to find. It's a numbers game. Okay. So if you do 100 presentations and 2 or 5 like you, it's a numbers game. Jump onto Google, see how some of these huge companies, taking a jump from the MSME, Carlyle Group. We can go over hordes of names, lots of stories. Persons usually tell their story at the end of their career or when they're super wealthy or happy, but don't feel bad to be vulnerable also. Tell your story early. Speak about your hard times. High net worth persons also like that because you're being genuine and you're being honest. So don't cover it up. If you're going through hard times with your business, if your SME is struggling, if the reality you're running a negative cash flow, you need an injection. Persons like that versus giving them 60 minutes over lunch of, I have the greatest brand. I have the greatest, contracts with so and so. So everything you're saying is about the future versus what is happening right now. High net worth investors will pick up on that and so forth. And, you have your credit union market, which has its niche as well too. You have many niches out there, the SME banks now, which have some funding or on lending, pick up all those checks if you can. Pick up all those checks. Any grant program that comes out, get your executive summary out. Create a data room, even a Dropbox. Put in Dropbox all your stuff, your bank statements. If you don't have financials, don't be afraid about your bank statements. Even if you have some personal expenses, you could explain them in a spreadsheet. Your executive summary, your incorporation, if you're incorporated from company's office. So make it simple. When you're trying to raise the funds and the capital, don't put the work on the person you're trying to raise the money from. You need to impress them. So don't send them 10 emails with 10 different PDF files, attachments, Excel sheets. Do one data room, just like you were going for your first, job interview. You were fully prepared, got your haircut, dressed nicely, had your resume ready, maybe 3 copies. So sometimes we do get complacent. Wherever we are, we get complacent. You do the work. Put everything in a data room, Dropbox, or all in one email, a Google link, and get all your ducks in a row. The person also will appreciate and say, this is a sign that this is a well-run business. This is a good Jamaican. This is a good person. We want to invest in him or her. And that is key. That's it. We'd love to hear about if any questions or how's everybody doing?
All right, thank you so much, Mark. What an interesting presentation. Thank you for having taken the time to share with us this morning. And I must also say it was not just a presentation that was dedicated to capital, but you also gave us quite a bit of general business tips about using our personal credibility and building that trust factor, which is very, very important. It's something that we always say at JBDC. For people to do business with you, number one thing is that they have to trust you. So that's
Yes.
really, really important. No matter how impressive the documents that you bring are, if they don't trust you, ain't gonna happen. So it's very, very good that you have shared, some of these things with us, things about taking the steps that we need to take as entrepreneurs. Sending a letter to the manager, sending an email to the info@whatever.com, because you never know who will pick it up and who will express an interest enough for you to even get a call back. Try to meet people. Don't think about your age. And you also said something about footnote 1. What was that again? I wrote it down, but I don't remember what.
Yeah, so in a lot of these, like audited financial statements, when you go, the audited financial statements, whether it's a junior company or a main market company, they will have, maybe 20 or 30 footnotes, Sansia, and footnote 1 typically is like an identifier. So it tells you like the business, the general business operations, as well as sometimes it goes into how it was capitalized, not usually, but it gives you a general overview of what that company does and the year. The point is it will tell you the year that the company was incorporated in Jamaica.
Okay. You mentioned too that Jamaica is a debt-driven market. Now,
Yes.
and you also talked about companies accessing debt capital.
Yes.
What is debt capital, and is that a good thing?
So it's a catch-22 question. So debt is not a bad thing. There is an adage that says, I'm probably, our parents, our grandparents, it's been a different culture as each cycle of Jamaica, or especially with the economy. So debt has always been viewed as a bad thing,
right?
Especially in the Caribbean, Jamaica, because especially in the 1990s period, and I think it's a culture setting that debt is a bad thing, and there is some truth, or there are facts to that. Now, because the country though and the culture, if you look at the number of stock market investors in Jamaica, it has improved rapidly over the last 5 or 6 years. But it's still, it might be off a couple of percentage points. It's still only 10% or 12% of the investing public. So that tells you that, the other pool out there, 88% of, let's say, people, we're not talking about money here, but persons, are focused on, they want guaranteed returns, or they want instruments that show returns. Now, of course, the issue with this market we're talking about is that there's no assets, there's no security. No, I had a client once had an interesting instrument, Sansio, and this is something where, I think anybody who has an MSME, you have to figure out how to get that legal advice, of course. If you can get it for free, from hopefully a colleague, or maybe someone in your office, or someone in your previous career, that's great. But, there are things that are international called like safe agreements, and there are agreements that, basically come in, they give you money. Let's say they give you 5,000 US, 10,000 US. And at a future point, if you find an equity investor, they convert that money into equity at that future valuation. So debt, I would never say debt's a bad thing, because if you use it wisely, if you look at a lot of companies, even on the stock exchange, a lot of them are leveraged or highly leveraged. I mean, take Panjam, take Derrimon recently. So I think it's natural for an entrepreneur or an SME company to say, well, if Derrimon has done it so successfully and bought other businesses, why can't I do it even if I'm small? If Panjam has raised debt, Jamaica Broilers, I think that shows that debt can work, but your business has to be able to manage it. So maybe you need convertible debt, because convertible debt, which is like a whole whiteboard meeting. The reality is that convertible debt typically doesn't need trucks and real estate as security. It's really putting an instrument on your MSME's balance sheet, and and the investor knows what the risk is, because if you now go and get a higher valuation, let's say sell 20% of your company in 2, 3, 4 years, boom, it triggers to convert that debt into equity, and that's the ideal type of instrument for an SME owner. In my opinion, because they don't have the assets, Sansia, they don't have, stuff to put in the registry. So they need money, which is kind of like quasi equity. It's almost like equity, but the culture still is that persons shy away from equity in small companies.
All right, couple of questions in the chat. 2 of them in particular speaking to how do micro businesses access grants to fund their operations, because the person is saying that most grants seem to be for small or medium-sized businesses. And then there's also another question that supports that as well. Why is it so difficult for micro businesses to raise capital? I think you spoke to that. Yeah.
That's how. No, it's a great question, and it's something that I was surprised. I was also, I was a bit upset when I saw it. And I know exactly probably what the person is asking, because there was a recent grant program. It was advertised heavily in the papers, but I think the caveat or the clause was that the company had to be doing like 50 or 75 million in revenues, and
impossible for micros.
Right. So impossible for micros. I mean, you're talking more about maybe medium-sized enterprises or small to medium. So when I saw that, especially with COVID-19 now and the pandemic, the issue that M, the M, micro is facing is that the market, the junior market started in 2009. Interest rates have been low for the last couple of years, 0.5% to, a few percentage points, and they're maintained at 0.5% by the central bank. So we have the main stock market, we have the junior market. Look at the timelines, 2009. Now, if the grant programs are supporting companies doing 50, 70, 75 million in sales, so the next step in the evolution of Jamaica should be for the micro businesses. But the micro business really hasn't been there in the macroeconomic system. When you think about the other side of the story, is that the micro sector hasn't had enough time, or the economy itself, since the financial crash in 2008 and other issues Jamaica has had, the economy hasn't yet really embraced or taken on the micro sector, in my opinion. And it might still be a few years away, but to answer your question is, yes, I mean, we need some micro specialists, or we need some micro funds available. But for right now, what they're really saying to you is, go to your credit union, get a personal loan, go to your personal banker, get a personal loan, and the market or the economy, and you never want to fight, miss the market, or you don't want to fight the market. The market is really saying the bitter medicine right now, unlike the USA and unlike developed countries, is they're not really going to fund micro today. You have to do that yourself.
So the general consensus is that as a micro business owner, you either have to have it yourself or go look alone.
Right. And that comes back to the debt security, right? And usually when you look alone, they want your personal guarantee, or they want your personal risk. They don't want your business risk, because the question still comes up. I mean, it is the long dated, Central Bank Act. I think it's 1942, but I don't want to misquote the act. I'm not sure if it's been updated. It's still, do you have security? So company ABC, do you have security? You have a minibus to give me, you have a taxi, you have a car, do you have something you can give me? And typically the person might say, I have something personally. So then all of a sudden the whole discussion goes to, okay, this is a personal loan, and then you take it, and you put the money into your endeavors, but we are not comfortable with that risk.
Okay. All right. Another question. What are the key checklist items for demonstrating trust?
For like for a micro business, any particular business, or just
I
generally?
guess I'm thinking it's micro business because this is the same person that asked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're developing trust with somebody, if you're developing a relationship with somebody, and that's your focus, then be on time for the meetings. If you have a meeting, if it's only electronic communication, then don't be afraid to call them. I've seen a lot of persons over the years, or even meetings, where someone says, well, I was waiting on your call, or I was waiting on your email. You can't be shy if you're going to develop trust. And if you're hungry, the person wants to see that you're hungry, so you have to get out there. Look, even if your company is small or micro, look, go print business cards. There's things now, like I think it's moo.com, MOO.com, where sometimes you can get business cards, you can ship them to Jamaica. There's so many things globally now that you can use. But get some business cards. I'm person ABC. This is my registered office, and boom, give the business card when you see that person out, even if they're at dinner with their family. But it doesn't have to be disrespectful or rude, but show that you are hungry. The person that wants to that trust with you, if they're willing to wants to see that you're hungry, because let's face it, 90 out of 100 people aren't going to necessarily do that. Maybe it's even 95 out of 100 people. So differentiate yourself. It's another adage. If you're different, whether you're noisy, whether you're hilarious, whether you have a great story, whether you're great at football, if you differentiate yourself, you're going to start to build trust. Now, after you do that, you have to, especially if it's a professional relationship, be professional with everything else. Be on time, answer the phone, call the person back. They're probably testing you because you want something from them, so they're testing you. And we don't know how long that phase might be. It could be a month, 3 months, 6 months. We all know, as Jamaicans, we want instant gratification. We want the answer tomorrow. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, all right. Another question from the chat. Great presentation, Mark. Question around debt capital. For some of our entrepreneurs who are bootstrapping or working full-time, would you recommend that they try to access debt capital via personal loans to invest in their startup? Oh yeah, you answered that already. Here's another one.
I did, Sansia, and what I would add to it is that you have all these different instruments, and there is free stuff on the internet. Go to Investopedia. Sounds like Wikipedia. Go there and look up preference shares, look up quasi instruments. Educate yourself. You have to educate yourself. Think about this picture. Okay, I have a food manufacturing company. I started small. I've put in 2 or 4 million from the credit union, as well as my personal funds. And all of a sudden, I'm now going to a high net worth investor, and I want to get 10 million from them. And all of a sudden, when the person says to you, well, you want a preference share? I'll give you the money tomorrow morning. You want a promissory note? If in that meeting, you say, well, explain a preference share to me, I don't know what it is. No, there's some great people out there, we're not being critical today, that will say, no problem, I know you're new to business, I'm happy to do it for you. Other people might say, that's a red flag. This person doesn't even know what the financial instruments are that he's asking me for help. This is going to be a headache for me. It's going to be a lot of work for me. And so you need to, just like the statistics in today's presentation, you got to jump onto Investopedia, learn these balance sheet items, preference share, debt instruments, so that you can figure out how to take on the debt instrument. I mean, there might be investors out there who are willing to give you $1 million Jamaican and give you moratorium on the interest or the principal payments until you can grow your business or get your business there in 6 months, and then you can make some interest only payments. So creativity also is king for survival, but you have to put in the effort. Don't go to somebody for money and then tell them, oh, you don't know what that means, and can they educate you and stuff like that. You have to go in there profit driven and money motivated to make this work.
Right. All right. So I have another question here from Kevin Jackson. I'm an animator and filmmaker who wants to make fictional content, series for local, regional, and international markets. The investment world seems very shy about creative content. How can I convince an investor to come on board to help fund my projects? Is angel investing the only option, or a credit card, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, creative industries. I mean, I guess everybody's had good and bad experiences in them investing. We've seen a few public companies have, bad experiences. We've seen a few private investors, have to write off their investments. So that's a tough sector, Kevin. It's a sector. Yes, you probably have to put in some of your own money, but what my personal opinion and Croskery Capital's opinion is that if you go 100% digital or 100% technology in Jamaica, I don't think it will work. I think you have to blend some brick and mortar still, or some creative idea with your digital idea. So let's say I'm Kevin and I have a digital business. Okay, well, what are your assets? Well, I have some filmmaking devices, I have some cameras. Okay, but how much did you really get that for? You got a ring light on Amazon for $100 and shipped it to Jamaica, but you're asking for 10,000 US. So the story doesn't add up in terms of your fixed assets, your equipment, and let's assume that investors are smart and they're going to do their analysis and ask you the questions. So after that finishes, think about what could you do? Do you need to start a marketing agency where you can get some guaranteed revenue or contracts because you have something that somebody else doesn't have? I mean, I personally don't like doing presentations. I don't like the tech side. I don't like all of these sides. You'd be surprised. So you have a skill set as Kevin that you probably understand graphic design, you understand all these things. So can you start a marketing agency? Is there a company out there that would blend or integrate with your video dreams that can give you some guaranteed revenue? It's almost, I don't want to use the word impossible. It's very hard to raise funds, whether it's debt or equity, based on this is my concept, this is my idea, especially in Jamaica. It is very hard. This is not Miami, New York, Boston, guys, at the end of the day, where people just believe in you and they'll just cut you a check, over dinner. This is a different environment, especially now with COVID-19, that adds to it, or with a pandemic. So my advice to you is start a marketing agency, do something that brings in some guaranteed revenue or checks, go get a retainer, because when you go and have lunch with somebody or dinner, breakfast, you can say, I have Kevin Video Limited. We have revenues now of $5 million or $10 million a year. We have 4 great clients. We do graphic design. But to add to that, I now want to chase his dream. It sounds more appetizing at that point.
Yeah. And just for information purposes, where Kevin is concerned, I remember some time ago I was doing an article on funding the creative sector, and one of the things that I came across is this thing called crowdfunding. It mostly, of course, happens online, as
Yes.
Mark was saying, in terms of searching the internet, finding out what's available out there, and tapping into that crowdfunding rather, is becoming a very popular way for creatives in particular to raise funds for their projects. There are a couple of sites that I cannot remember right now the names of them, but if you just put it in Google, crowdfunding for creatives, and you'll see a whole slew of websites come up, and they tell you what they're funding, to what amount, and how you can access these funds. The reality is that we well, as creatives, you will have to look beyond the local economy, because as we have seen time and time again, it is a very difficult ask, especially for the local financial sector, to fund this kind of thing. As Mark said, you're going to have to go in there and take a loan in your name, in the name of Kevin Jackson.
And Sansia, you make an important point, right? Because what sometimes the banker does, or the investor does, is they say, well, give me a personal guarantee and take the loan in your name. And if you seem gun shy, it's a great point. If you seem gun shy, or if you say, well, no, let me put it in the company name, let me do this, it's a deal breaker, because the next question is going to be, so you know, Kevin or whoever it is. So this means that what you're really saying to me is you want to take my money, but you wouldn't take it as a personal risk. So that tells me you don't believe in your business. And that's where you don't want a conversation to get there, because once that happens, it's a bad conversation, and they've, you know, the investors almost pinned you down in the chess game. So you really need to believe in your idea. And if you believe in your idea, then they will ask, as Sansia says, probably for some personal assurances.
Right. But what I want to find out from you though, Mark, how does Croskery Capital help our MSMEs to access funds in this kind of environment, particularly in the environment post-COVID, or we're living in COVID now?
Yes.
How would your organization be able to support in this in this time?
So you know, you can go to our website. Our website is croskerycapital.com. You know, so same exact name, everything, domain name, that's in the last slide, but croskerycapital.com. We really provide bespoke services. We, you know, have a fantastic Rolodex, you know, happy to, you know, consider, we can pull on persons for mentorship. We work with a lot of, you know, other consultants or firms very fast, very quickly. The big benefit is that we can give you a quick yes, or we can also tell you a quick no. The harsh reality is that you have to think about that, especially for the micro side. You know, the micro side, which is the toughest side, it's getting going, is it's a tough side because we have to speak honest. You know, Jamaica doesn't have, say, you know, a sovereign fund, you know, today that even invests in large companies, mid-sized companies. So, you know, yes, we have, you know, DBJ, you know, we have the National Insurance Fund that does make some investments. We have so many great agencies, and they have great staff, they have great people. But it seems pretty clear that in Jamaica today, 2020, whether we had COVID or no COVID, the point is that the equity capital is not going down. And it's a topic that's discussed all the time, you know, very positively, very energetic. But the point is that the capital is not going down to the micro side. So the answer is, and being practical, is that that's why we keep coming back to look at some, you know, family friends, look at some debt instruments. Don't try and keep fighting the market, because you know, if you see a newspaper article that pops up or some seminar that says, well, you know, Jamaica has billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in potential funding that could go into SMEs or MSMEs, it's not going to happen tomorrow morning. There are some funds that are allocated. There could be a lot more. You know, there's no investment manager out there with a team of analysts and lawyers and accountants who are sitting down with somebody that has, you know, a cook shop idea that could be huge with delivery and branded. It doesn't exist today in Jamaica. Now, hopefully that will change. I think that's one of the great things about connecting today. So really what happens is that how Croskery Capital can help you, you know, once you're viable and it makes sense and you build that trust, is we can always help you arrange. We're really an arranger and a financial advisor. So we can help, you know, introduce you to somebody, you know, see if your business has legs, you know, spend some time. But just be aware that, like anybody else that you're asking, it's probably going to have to be somewhat free time, because you're probably not going to have the amount of money for fees or to pay fee structures. And one of the things you can do is, as an entrepreneur, and I would also encourage this to everybody, don't be afraid to give up promotional equity in your business. So, you know, assuming that your business can, of course, pay taxes, stay up to date with Companies Office and TAJ, but also remember that promotional equity is a way that you can get some services free of cost, or FOC, whether it's with your accountants, whether it's with a financial advisor, arranger like Croskery Capital, is, and you can, if your company is formed, it has its, you know, register of shareholders at Companies Office Jamaica. You can also use promotional equity to help yourself.
Okay. All right, fabulous. So everyone, I went ahead and posted the website, www.croskerycapital.com. So on your free time, you can feel free to check it out, to see if there's any way that maybe a meeting with Mr. Croskery or one of his representatives can help you to move forward. In response to Jovian, the answer is yes. So you don't have to worry that you missed the presentation. It will be available on our YouTube pages later on today. And Kevin was just saying, you know, that he does uh, commercials, music videos, corporate videos, and the revenue is good. But, and this is a problem that not only creatives have, but it takes 30 to 90 days to come in. And a lot of times persons don't understand, you know, it's when you're a small business or a micro business, or you're small, but you're closer to micro than to medium. When they do work, they don't have time to sit around 3 months waiting on a check, because the reality is that that is what goes back into the business, whether it is to pay staff, acquire more equipment, get their promotion going, or even paying themselves. And so I think it is important, if with the business relationships that we build, that we honor the contractual arrangements so that persons are able to run their business efficiently. Very, very important that that is done, you know. All right, so what? Okay.
Yeah. You know, I was just saying quickly that I think Kevin is spot on. He is right. The reality though is that business is tough, right?
Yes.
Business can sometimes be a wicked place to be in, right? I mean, you're going to go through good times, Kevin, and hard times, bad times. It's like a cycle. I think the key thing is just don't hurt your relationships. You never know when you're going to need to pull on the relationships. You know, life is full circle. So, but business, that's business. If you decide to jump out of the employment pool, you know, if you decide to come out of, whether it's a commercial bank, the conglomerate, the big Jamaican companies, and you can see Jamaica's consolidating. The bigger companies are getting bigger, and they're going to get bigger. That's a reality of what's happening in Jamaica now. Worse with COVID. So you have to face that. So the thing is that you might want to target some of them for your digital contracts, you know, target some of them for your videos, commercials, you know, figure out, does the money come to you personally, or does it go into a bank account that you formed a company? Again, there are costs for forming a company, but if you want to chase your dream, form a company, put those revenues into it, and then figure out, you know, from a tax standpoint, how you handle it in terms of getting your income, whether you pay yourself a salary, you know what the income threshold is, and so forth. But the point is that once you come out of the employment pool and jump into, I'm an entrepreneur, you know, I'm a CEO of a company, I'm a managing director, understand that business is not fair. And, you know, persons may not pay you on time, you know, maybe also you may, you know, from their perspective, you might under deliver on your promise as well. So once you decide to come out there, you know, don't try and create a positive approach every day. You know, don't judge people, don't judge the companies. Maybe they're paying you late because they also have an issue, but you decided to take on, you know, the revenue contract to them. But as many old wise businessmen say, if you have some thoughts on it and are negative, then sure, go get a job, go work somewhere else and sell ice cream every day. So Kevin, you made a decision. You jumped into the entrepreneur zone, and it's gonna be hard. But once you break through it and you achieve your dreams, then it's all worth it. But it's never gonna be easy.
Right. All right. So one last comment from very great presentation, Mr. Croskery. I've learned so much. I'm a photographer and has been hit hard by COVID-19. And I see from your presentation that I can still market myself by being strategic and staying hungry. Thanks a million. I see a new way. All right. So
thank you.
Yeah, man. So, and there are quite a few good presentations. Thank you very much. Useful information, all of that in the chat as well. So I want to just express those to you, and to also thank you so much, Mark Croskery, for joining us this morning in the JBDC Virtual Biz Zone. I know that you could have been at Croskery making more billions for your other clients, but helping out our clients along the way. We certainly appreciate your presentation this morning.
Yeah.
Want to remember?
No, thanks. No, thanks for having me, Sansia. I really enjoyed it. You know, I and Croskery Capital are really passionate about the SME and the MSME space. You know, we are true believers that the way to grow Jamaica is going to be with more equity. You know, you have to do what you have to do, take on that debt, as we said, but the way to grow Jamaica is with more equity. And it's a fact, you know, the small businesses of Jamaica need more access to equity, you know, versus like I have to know somebody to be able to get equity. You know, the country and as Jamaicans, we have to get to that point where, you know, access to equity is, you know, based on the business and based on the business plan.
Yeah. And maybe you as such an influencer in the financial space can even make some form of representation when you get the chance to, you know, like how you did that initial public offering for the JSE. You know, if you get the chance to and you can influence a decision that will benefit our micro people in particular, I'm certain that they would be appreciative of that.
No, well, I think to the credit of JBDC and you, I mean, you're helping to push the envelope today in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so thank you very much again, Mark. Just want to remind everyone that this presentation, as well as all the other presentations that we have done in the JBDC Biz Zone, in our In Concert series, in our Gift and Craft Biz Zone, in our Entrepreneur's Journey, all the different activities that we've hosted through the Zoom platform, they are available on our YouTube channel, and that's at JBDC Jamaica. All you have to do is to just click subscribe, and once it's posted, you will be notified. Feel free to contact us. Our offices are still open, 876-928-5161 goes up to 5, and email us at info@jbdc.net. That goes to one person, but it will be directed to whomever the subject matter is addressed to. So you don't have to worry that no one will get your email. So thank you once again for joining us. Remember, we have another session at 1 o'clock today, the more practical session from our incubator and resource center. We're going to be looking at creating lavishly leather key rings. So ensure that you join us for that. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.